Okay, so here we are in week 2 of aesthetics, and things are moving along. Where we're at with the course, you've just finished your first segment of the mood board project, which you're very well aware of, I'm sure. I'm going to be taking a look at those. Normally, I try to get those done, of course, because our meeting schedule has changed. Normally, I try to have those finished within the first couple of days of the week, so you have that feedback. Things are a little mixed up right now, but I'm going to be getting on top of those tomorrow and hopefully have feedback on that. I usually like to have feedback to you on the exploration for the week, and then talk about some of those examples in class. But I'm going to do things a little bit differently tonight since the time has changed up a bit. Other announcements, have your feedback on your first Photoshop practice. Be sure to take a look at my feedback on that. Read through the comments I have, because even if you get full credit, a lot of times, just like the exploration, sometimes I'll offer some tips and suggestions on how to go about things, or point out some areas, things to keep in mind in the future, and that sort of thing. So take a look at that. And let's see. Next week, I believe, yes, next week is Hall of Fame, right? And it's a big event that Full Sail does. You've probably seen it on Connect if you go onto the Connect website, and I'm sure you've heard about it in your classes as well, hopefully. But there's going to be a whole bunch of guest speakers and panels and really interesting stuff going on, and most of it will be streamed online as well, so our online students can participate, or at least take advantage of that. There is a schedule out on it's available on Connect, so take a look at the panels that are out there. There are some really good topics. There's several that are on personal branding, on the future of media, a series, I think, on developing branded assets, and social media topics. So take a look, and I encourage you to participate in as many of those as you can, as time permits. Campus students what happens typically is campus classes do not meet during those times, and the students are encouraged to attend a few of those, like those panels instead. Since this is an online class, it really doesn't affect what we're doing at all, and particularly since we're meeting on Tuesday and the festivities don't really start until Thursday of next week. But I still encourage you to check that out, and really take advantage of it, because there's a lot of really impressive speakers from various aspects of the media and entertainment industry. And I think that's all as far as my announcements go. One thing I wanted to get your thoughts on is our exploration assignment, because it's still scheduled to be due tonight, but our meeting is due tonight as well. Our meeting is happening tonight, so I don't know how that's going to impact your time management and schedule. Are you still okay doing the exploration activity tonight, or should I bump it to tomorrow? Because I know some of you have another class meeting tomorrow as well. Okay. Yeah, the video is, if I recall, it's not super long, so hopefully you can get through that. And then the movie posters will take you, an hour or so to find a good one and do the write-up. Okay, well, I'll leave it for tonight for now, and if I get, depending on the reaction that I see tomorrow, maybe we'll adjust. Did you guys have any questions or any thoughts that you wanted to share before we get started? I'm glad. Thank you for that feedback. I'm glad that you find it beneficial. Okay, so this week's topic is all about color. If you remember the definition from week 1 of applied media aesthetics, it is the study of how different media elements interact and perceptual reactions to that combination of elements. And color is one of those media elements in itself. Color is in everything. In most types of media, there will be color, or even black and white, which in itself is one of the color schemes. And it plays a part in conveying the message of your media, whether it's influencing the mood or the emotion, or if it's directing attention, or creating a specific personality. It is going to be there, and it's very much it underscores your media, very much like a musical score. If you think about when you're watching a movie, the music's playing, it's almost sometimes an unconscious thing. You kind of tone it out, but it still is there setting that mood. If you watch a horror film and those shrieking violin sounds start building up, you know something's about to scare the crap out of you. Or in, say, Star Wars, when that orchestra is building and all the action's taking place. It's there, it underscores the action and builds the mood. And color works the same way. It's usually more subtle, and you might not even know it's been manipulated and planned in order to take part in the media, but it is. Nothing is ever left to chance. Have either of you ever worked with the color wheel in an art class or anything along those lines? Okay, so in graphic design or in a painting class. Yeah, the color wheel is pretty consistent, whether it's in graphic design, painting, photography, and other forms of art. There's a little bit of difference whether if you're working with physical mediums like paint as opposed to digital mediums like Photoshop and so forth. But for the most part, it works. The ideas work the same way. The color wheel is laid out so that those colors that are directly opposed to one another, these are actually based on, let me back up, these are actually based on our color perception, the way our eyes interpret colors. There's the rods and the cones, the little optic nerves, and I believe it's the cones that perceive color, and they only perceive a certain range at a time. So when you have these colors, say, where is it? Red and green, they're competing for the processing time, if you want to use a computer analogy. They're competing for those receptors. And so they have a really strong contrast with one another. Like they compete, and it creates this sort of vibration when they're seen next to each other. And the color wheel is laid out according to that idea. I don't know that the early artists knew that's what it was, but just based on how they perceived the colors. So ones that are closer together are similar. Ones that are farther apart from one another become more and more different. So hopefully, I hope my mic isn't actually fading. You guys hear me okay? Okay. Okay, great. So, and this is the basic idea. The colors that are closer together, are more similar. Those that are farther apart are more different and more highly contrasting. And with those principles in mind, you can plan some really interesting effects and really interesting color schemes. Looking at the color wheel, you can see that there's, on this particular color wheel, there's 3 layers. Each color hue, and a hue is the pure color, say green, has lighter varieties and darker varieties. The darker varieties are called shades. The lighter varieties are tints. But they're all considered that single color. And this is a very simple color wheel. There would be gradients all fading from one into the next if you really broke it down. But just for simplicity's sake, we'll use this. Looking at a couple of, actually I meant to remove these slides, but we'll look at them anyway because they're good examples. And you can see the visual impression, and I'll put this out to you guys. When you look at this old movie poster from Gone with the Wind, how does the color influence the feeling that you get from this? What is, I'll say, the most of the color there is the reds and oranges and yellows. And what does that call to mind? It's sort of looks like perhaps there's a fire going on back there, doesn't it? Yeah, and passion is a good word for this, and particularly because you have those characters, Vivian Leigh and Clark Gable, that look like they're about to have a very passionate kiss too. So the color again underscores the action on the page or on the screen. Look what happens when we change this to more of a complementary color palette. And what happens now? It kind of tones it down, doesn't it? Takes away some of that feeling. Yeah, it's a little calmer. And here's Amelie, another very well liked film, and we have the red and the green that are, remember, they're opposites on the color wheel. So she stands out, right? It makes her our center of focus, and there's that contrast. Well, taking away the contrast, I should say. So now it's more subdued. It's almost kind of like she's, rather than standing out, she's now kind of looks a little more, doesn't she feel more meek or shy because she's blending in? So those were just a couple of quick examples. Yeah, she becomes part of the background, like Asia says, of how the color can affect your perception, not just moods, but also where your attention is directed. And I'm going to, in the lecture tonight, I'm going to break it down in that way. We're going to look at how color affects mood first, how mood and emotion, how it can be used to direct attention, and then I'll talk a little bit about branding, use of color in branding. And that's going to play a big part in your mood board assignment coming up. In both of those examples, you saw that there are warm colors and there are cool colors, right? When we saw the Gone with the Wind poster in all the oranges and yellows, it was passionate, it was fiery. There was a sense of an actual fire in the background. And those are the warm colors. So they carry that kind of energy, that excitement, passion, or action. And they tend to appear to be popping out towards you. Think about Amelie in her red sweater. It makes her pop forward like she stands out from the background. When I change that to the green sweater, she kind of, like Asia said, went into the background. Cool colors are like that. They tend to recede, and they have a more subdued and calm feeling. And these are important factors to keep in mind, because what happens when you start pairing warm colors and cool colors, then you get a little foreground and background definition. Those warm colors are going to pop forward. Cool colors define your backdrop. The warm color becomes more intense against the cool colors. So that feeling of passion or that feeling of excitement becomes that much more amplified. Really quickly, and this was in the video, so I don't want to spend too much time redundantly going over this, but some of the basic color schemes that are used in media, in art, in anything involving visual imagery. At the most fundamental is monochromatic, and this means one color, single color. And this is a painting. This is by Pablo Picasso, and this is a monochromatic painting. There's different tints and shades of blue, but it's all blue. And using those darker and lighter tints and shades, he was able to create shadows and highlights and the feeling of contours and form. So it's not completely flat. It's not completely boring, but it does tend to have less. It doesn't have the advantage of the contrast if you have multiple colors. It doesn't have that color richness. A couple of more modern day examples. And you see that depending on whether they're warm colors or they're cool colors, it can be really subdued, very calm, introspective, or kind of moody, or it can be more energetic and dynamic, or you still have that fiery effect with the gladiator. So monochromatic palettes can be very effective. They can be very visually appealing, but more often than not, you'll want a greater range of color to work with. So to create more visually interesting media. And so that's when the analogous and contemporary, or complementary, not contemporary, complementary color schemes come into play. Welcome, Corey. Make sure you mute your mic as well. And Melvin, I actually will be talking about the full cell colors when we get to branding. Full cell colors are the kind of burnt orange, and that it looks like an olive green. It's actually, according to the color codes, a very dark shade of yellow. So depending on whether you see that as green or as yellow would affect that. If it's perceived as green, it's more complementary. And since it looks like a green, it would be a complementary color contrast. But I'll actually have some examples of that, of full cells branding up a little later in the class. So branching out from monochromatic colors, you have analogous colors, which are just a handful of colors, maybe 3, sometimes more, that are pretty similar to one another, pretty close on the color wheel. So it's still pretty subdued. Usually has more of a calm effect. Sometimes it can be more exciting if you have warm colors instead, as we see with the Incredibles or Les Indestructibles. Or if you're using analogous cool colors, it's more subdued, more calm, as in the Bug's Life, which is still a fun design, but doesn't have the action-packed look of the Incredibles. But if you really want to drive the sense of energy and kind of dynamic excitement home, you use complementary colors. Really good, strong contrast. These are colors that are from the opposite side of the color wheel. So you'll almost always have a warm color and a cool color paired together. And again, these are those ones that are competing for your color receptors, so they have that kind of vibrational energy feel. Not a literal vibration, but they feel like they're conflicted with one another. And again, like I was saying, the cool colors tend to recede, warm colors pop forward, so this helps to direct your attention and pull that cafe scene into the foreground. And a couple of examples. You'll often see this used with action movies, especially the blue and orange combination is very popular because it gets that warm and cool color contrast. It can pull in explosions and so forth. Or the red and green complementary colors, in this case, just lets the Mad Hatter pop into the foreground, just like we saw with Amelie. And finally, there are many different color palettes or color schemes that I could go into, like split complementary and triadic and quadratic. Those are basically variations on these two ideas, analogous and complementary. And if you understand complementary colors and analogous colors, you can basically plan nearly any color scheme to get the visual impression you want. Because once you understand those, you know how colors react with one another. Opposites are contrasting. Those that are close on the color wheel are similar and more harmonious. And then there's achromatic. Achromatic means no color, without color. So this is black and white or grayscale. Black and white are not considered colors in formal color theory because they don't appear on the color wheel. They don't have complements. Black and white are not complementary colors to one another. I hear that occasionally. I'll hear that stated in an exploration activity, but they're sort of outside of that model. But it can be very useful. Achromatic or grayscale tends to have less energy than if you're using color because you don't get the advantage of those color contrasts or the psychological associations of color and so forth. So they're more subdued. Sometimes it can be depressed. You often have a very serious tone, but can be very elegant. It really depends on the subject matter and the context. And that's something we'll see a lot of, is that context is what really ultimately is important. So examples, there's James Bond and Spectre, and that achromatic color palette makes it very serious, kind of gritty. He's got that serious look on his face, and so it's very no nonsense. And the Fast and the Furious, or Furious 7, it's not completely colorless. You can see a little bit of skin tone, but it's desaturated to the point of being basically achromatic. And in this case, it's intended to give a very depressed, not depressed isn't the right word, subdued and sentimental feel, because this was, and I can't think of the actor's name, this was his last movie before he passed away, and the poster was designed almost as a tribute. Paul Walker? Okay. I can never remember that. Thank you. And Vin Diesel and he were actually close friends, and so that's what this was. It's kind of a dual purpose, promoting the movie, but also as a tribute to the actor. And another thing that achromatic allows is to throw in accent colors. And this is a scene from the movie Schindler's List. The little girl in her red coat is the only color you see in the movie. And it immediately becomes the focal point. You can't help but pay attention to that accent. And this is something that can be used often in images, in movies, and in other media to draw attention. In web design, you'll see this used to highlight important buttons or content areas to draw attention. Like a click here kind of banner. So this was kind of a review. This is all content that's in the Linda videos that you'll be doing with the exploration. But I needed to go over that really quickly just to kind of give a baseline. Are there any thoughts or questions so far? Okay. And I'm trying to keep up with the chat, but if you do want to unmute your mic and ask a question as well, that's fine. So one of the biggest uses of color is to create emotion, or to create mood, or to create some symbolic meaning. We saw this with the Gone with the Wind poster, where, as you guys described it, had a sense of passion. Sometimes you'll see a chart that'll say red stands for passion, green stands for life, yellow is happiness. But I really don't like those charts. I don't like it to be that prescribed, because that's really not realistic. Nothing is that cut and dry. You can't say that red will always be a passionate color. Sometimes red is a dangerous color. Sometimes red is a warning sign, or what have you. Sometimes, it's you never know, basically. So color can influence mood and can influence emotion, but it's not that easily prescribed. It's an interaction of imagery, of words, of color, and all of those elements. You were exploring with your Photoshop assignment, doing some visual storytelling. So that's words and imagery, but you can also use color to underscore, to emphasize. So, having just said that red isn't always a symbol of passion, here is red as a symbol of passion. So you see, this whole thing, this whole ad is just flooded with the color red. The car is red, the background is red. But look at what's pictured, and the words, what the words say. Rekindle the flame of passion. You only need 1 drop of petrol. And the emphasis is on, in the imagery, is on the look of the car, in the red sporty color. I don't know if it's still true, but it used to be, the insurance rates for red cars used to be a bit higher, because they tended to be seen as more sporty and things that you would take more risks in. So in this case, you're using red to emphasize that flame of desire. And in fact, this will be important next week when we talk about visual hierarchy, but look how they've emphasized those specific words. And that connects in strongly with that background color. and thinking about the warm versus cool colors and the moods that they create. How do you see that playing a part in this movie poster? Could you, what do you mean by that, Melvin? To expand on that a little bit. Looking at this this particular movie poster and how color is used there. And look, in particular, look at their facial expressions. Yeah, okay. Okay, yeah, both of those are on the right track. So in the upper image, you have Jason Bateman, and he's struggling with these little infants, and he's got a very troubled look on his face, and that's associated with that blue, that cool color. It has that subdued emotional state. Sometimes it's depressed, and again, depending on the context. So in this case, that serves as the underscore for his current state of emotion that he's expressing there. He's really struggling, whereas Ryan Reynolds in the lower image is having a much better time and has that warm orange background. So much more energetic, much more upbeat, and a more higher emotion. So this is a pretty straightforward, pretty blatant example of that. Movie posters tend to be more straightforward with this. But the same ideas are used in creating movies and television shows. Have any of you watched the series Breaking Bad? No? Okay. Very popular with your faculty here in MCPS, but okay, so Corey has seen it. Those of you who haven't, if you're planning on watching it, I'm going to warn you there's going to be some spoilers in what I'm going to say right now. The graphic that you see here is an infographic that someone created where they sat down and recorded colors associated with each character in each episode, possibly each scene, in the entire series. So, and this the same idea could probably apply to Game of Thrones as well, Asia, if you took the time to really examine it. And what they've done is, when creating this graphic, is put in key points and connected that with what's happening in the series. I don't know if you can read this, but that's okay. I'm going to point out a couple areas. The character of Jesse Pinkman, as Corey knows, he's this young, hot-headed kid, runs off at the mouth a lot, has just a potty mouth, and just kind of explodes at any given moment. And so what do you see in his timeline? A lot of warm colors, right? A lot of reds, a lot of yellows. Really goes right along with his personality. Now these colors probably represent the clothes he's wearing. Maybe he's wearing red shirts, car he's driving, the room he's in, the decor, whatever is seen with him, and in each of those scenes. But let's look at some interesting cases. So you have all this red and yellow, mostly in the first season. Beginning of second season, though, this is point number 3 on the legend. It says, abducted by Tuco. And you remember Tuco's a bad guy. He's like a drug lord that they're dealing with. And it goes from this streak of red into a long period of just darkness, black. He's been abducted by this pretty dangerous person. So, and I can't remember exactly what's happening at that point. I think maybe he's locked in a dark room or in a trunk of a car or something. It's not pleasant, but the emotional state is dark, and so the colors go dark. Eventually it recovers. Things go back to the yellows and reds and so forth. But down the road here, we have another streak of red associated with Jesse, but then it goes to gray, and then to black and white and gray. So what's going on there? Something has, we could probably predict, has taken, kind of pulled the rug out from under him again. Actually, at point number 5 is where Jane dies, his girlfriend dies. So it's kind of like the color goes out of his life. And this is all done very purposely. Yeah, this is a pretty impressive graphic. Whoever created this, really spent some time on it. So, and it's a great visual aid. But what this shows is that all of this is planned. Whether it's with the director or Vince Gilligan, as the quotes down there in the corner says, I want to do the color timing on each of these episodes where you sit down with the colorist and make sure that the color for each individual scene is just the way you want it. So these are factors that you that most of us don't really think about when we're watching a movie, but they have put tons of thought into. There's actually a part of the production called a colorist who's doing this, and it's the costumers who are planning this, and the directors and the lighting is planning this, because they know that this is going to play a part, however subtle, in how you respond to what you're seeing on the screen. Have you all seen The Matrix? Tell me you've all seen The Matrix. Otherwise, more spoilers are coming. So when you're watching The Matrix, and especially early on in the first movie, what do you notice about the color? And this image kind of illustrates this. The green. And it's a lot of green. Sometimes it's a little more blue. But in the early scenes, and since you guys have all seen it, it takes place in a virtual world, right? It's not reality, it's a simulation. But they don't tell you that at first. And the first time you've seen the movie, you're kind of figuring out what's going on. But there's always sort of this otherworldly look. It's like it's not quite what we'd expect in nature. And it's because they're trying to create this kind of feeling of unease, like something isn't quite right. But you can't quite put your finger on it. And so you have Morpheus here, and even, everything is green, the building behind him, even his skin tone has a green cast to it, because it's not our natural world. But what happens when they get out of the Matrix, and especially when they go to Zion, the last human city, now we have the different tones. We have more natural skin tones. We have warm colors for a change. And it feels lifelike, because this is where life is really happening in the context of the movie. Yeah, and this is like there's a huge party celebration going on, because this could be their last day on Earth, because the evil robots are coming. Then there's a third environment they go into, and actually you see this before you see the city, and that's when they're out in their ship. So they're not in the Matrix, they're not in the virtual world, they're in the real world, the quote real world of the movie, but they're in this very cold and uncaring environment. And this is when you see the blue, especially a lot of blue and gray, because the world is in ruins, and it's meant to feel very inhospitable and cold and uncaring and mechanical because machines have taken over, right? So everything has this very cold feel until they get to the safety of their home city. So it creates that feeling. Another really good example of this is the movie Black Hawk Down, which is about some U.S. military personnel who crash in a helicopter in the middle of Mogadishu in Somalia, and they have to survive the trip back to their base by foot through this very hostile setting. The whole time they're out in the city, there's an orange cast to everything. It's this warm color, and it's kind of a if you hear the filmmaker talk about it, it symbolizes the danger that they're in. But then at last, and I guess I should say spoiler alert again, when those who make it back get back to the base, it slowly fades to more of a blue tone on everything. And it's sort of a subtle indication of that they have reached safety. So it's very interesting to see how that's used in that way. And this is another interesting case. This is from the movie Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And which is set in the 1910s, say around the turn of the century. And they've applied a sepia tone to everything. Yeah, another great movie. It's one of the Coen brothers movies. We know logically that even back in that time in history, everything was in color, just like it is now. People didn't perceive the world in less color, but by adding that sepia tone, it gives it an antique look. It makes it feel like this old-timey setting. So psychologically, to us as modern viewers, we associate that with that time period. It's not necessarily accurate, but it's what we would expect and what kind of on a subconscious level. So they've applied that sepia tone throughout the film to give it that sense of the time period. And one more. Action movies. Whether it's Iron Man or the Avengers or Star Wars or Transformers, all the big blockbusters, you'll see a lot of orange and blue, or red and blue, oranges and reds, and the cool colors, blue and greens, because it accentuates the action. Again, we have Iron Man popping forward against that blue sky of the background. The contrast between that warm blue and the fire makes it feel that much more energetic. So pay attention to, especially movie posters, and all of the exciting action movies will almost invariably use orange and blue as their main colors. Yes, those are good examples, Corey. Pleasantville plays with color, the black and white slowly going into color, actually in a literal sense to connect to emotions. And What Dreams May Come just has that sort of a dreamlike fantasy quality that plays around with color to set the moods and the feel, because there's a lot of themes of love and depression and kind of despair. So you see the shifting moods in that as well. So if you get a chance, check out both of those. And just so you see, this doesn't just apply to movies. This applies across the board. Web design. Here's that same complementary color palette. So this, basically the same colors. And they've used that in their web design because if you look at some of the copy content on here, you see that they take a very lighthearted approach to presenting their business. This is actually a web design service. So great websites, no lame marketing slogans is their lame marketing slogan. And you see lines like, seriously, these days, everyone and their mom has a website. So so very upbeat, very kind of tongue-in-cheek and lighthearted, and those contrasting complementary colors go along with that energy and help to enhance that energy. Any thoughts or questions or comments or other examples that you can think of? Okay. So color, probably one of its biggest uses is in setting mood and creating energy, a sense of energy, but it can also be used in composition in order to direct your viewer's attention. This connects directly to what we're going to study next week with visual hierarchy and directing attention of your viewers. This is actually a photo I stole from a friend on Instagram. What's the first thing your eye goes to? It's the mushroom, yeah, without question. Why? And the branches, yes. But look at this and think about your color wheel again. What do you see? Red and green, they're opposites, right? So that mushroom is going to stand out stronger than anything against that green backdrop. Yeah, that's a true complementary color pair. And again, what do you see? Red and green, right? Where's our attention being directed to? Harry Potter on his broom. So it's not by chance that he's flying against the solid wall of green back there in his Gryffindor robes. For the record, I'm a Ravenclaw, but I don't play Hogwarts politics, so it's all good. So this is a very action-packed scene, right? They're playing Quidditch, and he's flying around with Malfoy chasing after or following behind him. But our attention stays on Harry Potter because there's all that green grass and all the green trees, and even these giant stands have sort of a yellow-green cast to them, so that our attention can stay very well focused, even though he's moving and kind of bobbing all over the place. And this works for any complementary color scheme. Orange and blue, again. This one's interesting because we not only have the color contrast drawing attention to her face. This is from Crimson Peak, by the way. You also have the lines in the architecture pointing towards her. They all converge on that focal point, which is her face and the candelabra that she's holding. Yeah. Would that be called a candelabra? I think so. So this all, again, it's the interaction of the media elements. We have the color, which makes her face stand out against the cool color background. The lines in the architecture directing attention to the face itself expressing emotion, and that's where our eye automatically will almost always go to the person's face because that's how we communicate feeling. So you see how all those factors have been planned to work together to amplify the expressiveness of the scene. I already talked about this one and how the complementary colors just make him pop forward from the backdrop, but I included this again for a particular reason, because I wanted to kind of remind you of this idea, but then show these images. Have you ever noticed that every newscast has a cool color background, usually blue? Sometimes it's a skyline, sometimes it's monitors. It always looks like something important's going on back there, but it's really just filler. But this isn't by chance. The cool color background is there because our skin tones are all in the warm color range. And so by having your news anchor or other talking head appearing on the screen, they stay the focal point. They will stand out and have your attention. So this is an application of complementary colors. Any complementary color pair will work in this way, whether it's purple and yellow, red and green, or the popular blue and orange. And that's something to keep in mind in your own work, not just this month, but in the future as well. But with your mood board assignments, when we get to week 4 and you're creating your design, you can make use of that idea to emphasize your focal points. Because this week's Photoshop practice deals specifically with altering color in a photograph, so you're not stuck with what you start with. You can change the colors in any way you want, whether you want to change your hair color or change the tone of the entire photo. So last, and we're getting close to the hour mark, so I don't want to take too much more time, but I wanted to talk about color and branding. And this will play a part in your mood board activities, but it'll also play a part in a lot of stuff you do from here out. Because color is an integral part of branding, just as it is an integral part with filmmaking and other media formats. It really defines, it's a major factor in defining a brand's personality. These are some that I'm sure you guys are familiar with, especially Starbucks is very popular. And look what happens when I switch their color palettes. It just kind of on a subconscious level feels wrong, right? It just is. It's almost like you don't know this person anymore. Same thing here. Let me go back. UPS, the gold and brown, is very iconic to their brand. They even describe it, use it in their advertising to describe themselves, the gold and brown. Reverse those, and it just doesn't compute anymore. So the illustration, the point is, branding is not just a logo. Branding is all the things that go into defining the personality of your brand. The tone of voice, the imagery, the emotional associations, and the color. And so it's important to define a color scheme and stay consistent with it. And that's exactly why in your mood board for this week, you're going to be selecting colors and also recording the color codes. Those codes, they're numeric codes, tell a graphic artist how to reproduce that color precisely so that your orange isn't a little different each time you create your logo. It stays the same because that consistency builds familiarity and builds recognizability so people know your brand and come to recognize it. Here's our full sail colors. This is actually directly from our full sail style guide. I wasn't allowed to give you the color codes, but I can show you this. And there's that orange and the greenish color. I'm going to refer to this as green, even though technically it's yellow. My eyes see green. But you'll see this in all of our materials, right? You've seen the logo a million times. You've probably noticed that this color scheme is used on our websites. And if you look at the course catalog, the printed course catalog, you'll see the same colors again. In the title pages, even the little page number boxes are in that yellow, that orange. If you look at the regular printed pages, they use the orange to emphasize certain quotes or titles and so forth. So these colors are consistently used to build that recognizability. Yeah, it's sort of a moss green. That's the way I would describe it as well. And this is what I would call a complementary color relationship. So the orange, the warm orange, again pops out from that green, so it catches your eye. And this is used repeatedly in all of our business cards, our websites, and other materials. And in fact, if you noticed my title slide at the beginning of this presentation, and also your mood board templates, I've kept to the Full Sail branding on those as well. There's also this metallic silver. I rarely see that. I see it at graduations in the graphics they put on the screen a lot, but aside from that, it's uncommon. So that's the idea. You're going to be working in the future as a media professional. Maybe you are already. And if you're involved in any kind of graphic design, advertising, marketing, PR, this is going to be a factor. For your mood board exercise this week, you're going to create your own personal color scheme for your personal brand. This is something that you can take with you past this class. It can be something that just gets you through this exercise, but put some thought into it. And because when you get to graphic design for communication down the road, Jacob, who teaches that class, will have you revisit this and use those colors in creating business cards and branded material. So put some thought into this and think about how you can actually create something that you take forward with you and colors that you want to use. Again, don't put too much stock into this kind of chart and this kind of breakdown. This is in the video as well, the Linda video. He talks about psychological associations of different colors. I see this everywhere. It can be a good reference, but don't consider it carved in stone, because again, red isn't always youthful, bold energy. Purple isn't always wise and imaginative. It depends on the context. Blue isn't always trustworthy and dependable. It depends on the context, the subject matter, the imagery associated with it, the industry that it's in. The only rule that I've seen, and this isn't really a rule, but a trend that I've noticed, is that brands that want to be more reserved, or maybe more conservative, more business-like, tend to stick to the primary colors. So those colors like red, blue, yellow. Whereas those that want to be more trendy, more hip, or creative or artsy feeling, will deviate from that to go into more of the secondary and tertiary colors. So getting into green, purple, orange, and those colors that are a little more, can be described as more quirky. So even looking at this chart, the ones that are in the primary colors are UPS, Nikon, Sprint. And there's some exceptions, of course. I mean, McDonald's is not necessarily considered the most serious and conservative of brands, but the majority are ones that are pretty traditional businesses. Same thing with the blues and the reds. Whereas if you get into purple, now you have Barbie and Sci-Fi Channel, and well, Taco Bell, if that counts. So then the question is, how do you choose your brand colors? How do they go about deciding what they're going to use? And here are some examples. Let's take a look at BP in particular. What do you see there as far as their colors go? Okay, it's calm and warm and inviting. You have a lot of greens, right? Has some yellow, sort of a little bit of a green tone to the yellow, but then a lot of greens. It's kind of Corey says life, because it's almost like a flower, right? Why do you think they would choose those colors and that flower motif? Thinking about who BP is and what business they're in. Better Petroleum. And how does that color scheme tie into that? Okay, there you go, earth friendly. The company is going green. As a petroleum company, so an oil company, what image do you not want to have? You don't want to be seen as environmentally unfriendly. You don't want to be tied to that image of oil spills and so forth. So you create branding that is green and has this very natural feel and has this, imagery that calls to mind life, and it's almost, I don't know, you can look like the sun as well as the flower, so it's nature friendly is the image that it's conveying. Whether that's accurate, the record will show, but you can see how that thought process went into deciding on those colors. Intel is a plain monochromatic blue logo, very simple, and they're a business company. I mean, they're a business. They create computer components, so they're not going to go for a super fun, upbeat brand necessarily. They want to be taken seriously. Whereas Firefox goes for complementary colors, orange and blue. It's exciting, it's action-packed. You have that swoosh of the fox's tail going around the globe. So when you're creating your own brand, you've already defined a design concept. You have your mission statement, so you kind of know the personality that you want to put forward as a public personality you want to put forward as a professional, the kind of energy you want to capture, the kind of audience you want to attract. Think about that, and think about what colors would best capture that. Start with a single color. Maybe it's blue. You want to be seen as kind of an authority or a serious figure in your field. By the way, this is a little bit of a tangent, but as I said before, don't put too much stock into prescribed color meanings. But if you think about the color blue and its significance in our society, in our culture, it is often associated with authority figures, whether it's the police uniforms or military officers or what have you. blue business suits, we have that perception. That's a cultural thing. It's not a universal kind of innate, instinctive thing, but it's something we have come to perceive. And so you can take advantage of that. If you want to be seen as authoritative, go with blue. But Firefox didn't choose blue for their globe because they wanted to be seen as authoritative. They chose it because it makes the Firefox stand out better and give it that contrast to drive the energy. The Firefox orange is logical because it's a fox, and not only a fox but a firefox, so it has to have that fiery color. So the major themes could also play a factor. So once you decide on that first color, the one that's sort of your definitive color, look at your color wheel. You can Google a color wheel pretty easily and check, unless you have one. And if you don't, I actually recommend you can pick one up at a craft store for a couple of dollars, and it's a really good reference to have. But then think about, okay, now I have this color, this base color of blue. Do I want to have more of a calm, reserved feel, or do I want to have an exciting feel? Because if I want to convey an exciting feel, then pick a complementary color, a warm color to go with your blue, orange or red or yellow, something that has a really stark contrast. It'll feel more dynamic when you pair those together. But if you want it to be more reserved, more calm or elegant, you can take an analogous color, a green or a violet or something in the cool range that will go with it very harmoniously. And you can build up your color scheme in that way. I wouldn't go more than, say, 3 colors tops for brand colors, because we're talking about colors you'll use for your logo and colors you'll use for your title text and stuff like that, not necessarily colors that will be splashed all over the place. I mean, like your image, if we look at an advertisement, the entire image isn't done in brand colors, it's just the branding part. And that's what we're dealing with right now. So 2, maybe 3 colors tops for your mood board, for your brand colors. But really think about how those colors work together and what kind of energy and impression they will create. Because there's basically 2 factors there, right? Where you're starting off with the feeling conveyed by that first base color, and then the energy created by what it's paired with. And it's perfectly acceptable to have a monochromatic brand color, like Intel did here. It's not unheard of at all. And just yet another example. This is Burger King. You can see those colors repeated. You don't see the blue as much, but the gold and the red in everything. Signage, menus, packaging, all across the board. And that's what we're going for. Any questions on that? Any thoughts? Do you guys have colors that you think would play a part in your brand, your personal brand? Maybe too much? Cool tones of green. Okay, so greens or turquoise paired with maroon, it's a bit of a deeper color. It's a good color contrast. And I mean, I don't know exactly what the emotion or the personality you're going for there, but it feels very non-traditional in a sense. Okay. if it fits, then go with it. And sometimes I'll see. The question was, do you have any particular colors in mind already for your personal brand? Sometimes I'll see a mood board turned in, and the explanation of why they chose the colors is simply, these are my favorite colors. And it's, my feeling is that's fine, but if you throw a bunch of colors together because they're your favorite colors, they might clash. It might just be a mess. And I want you to have a rational reason based on color theory why you're choosing those colors. You can choose your favorite color to begin with, but if your favorite color is purple and you want to be seen as a very serious PR rep or PR professional, using pink and purple logos might not be the best choice, even if they are your favorites. Okay, so red, gray, and white for Melvin, and that red is really going to be an accent that's going to stand out against that gray and white, which will be more reserved. So could be a very dramatic look, or it could be a very serious look, depending on how you use it. So as you move into your Photoshop practice for this week, you're going to be continuing to do some visual storytelling with the Photoshop by manipulating photographs, but you're also going to be altering colors in those photographs. And as you're doing that, I want you to think about how the color manipulation affects the viewer's perception. See if you can't use that in a way that draws attention to a particular object or a particular place in the image. And then see if you can't use that to change the overall mood of the image. Even though it's not necessarily a requirement for the assignment, it is something that it's the purpose of why we're doing this. So use this as a chance to both practice Photoshop and practice these ideas. All right, any last questions or comments or thoughts? We're pretty well over the 1 hour mark. I don't want to keep you too long. This usually is the longest of the class meetings. Okay, if you guys are all set, then I'm happy to let you go for the evening. Those of you who are on campus, I'll likely see you on Friday at the Friday Blend meeting. But otherwise, I wish you a good evening and a good week, and get in touch if you do have any questions. Thanks for joining me tonight. Have a great night.